Danielle Sheerin from the Barclays innovation team, and I have the absolute privilege and pleasure to lead our suite of digital fintech programs, the Rise Academies. We offer a number of programs for whatever stage of growth you are as a fintech. So a bit of a call out first. If you want to know more, come and see us at our stand on the Fintechs on the Rise space and learn more about our programs. If you are not a fintech, but you're still in the ecosystem, please share these programs with your networks and be part of how we are keeping this ecosystem growing and thriving. So on to today's conversation. Rising from founder to CEO. This really brings to life our later stage program, the Rise Growth Academy. This program takes seed stage fintechs to Series A, but also focuses in on the individual journey from founder to CEO. One of the ways we do this is by providing one-to-one scale-up coaching with someone who has built and exited a company, so deeply understands not just the impact, but the importance of that transition. So without further ado, I am delighted to welcome Anton Padmasiri to the stage, CEO of WealthOS and an alumni from the Rise Growth Academy, and Duncan Knight, who is one of our fantastic scale-up coaches. So enjoy the panel, and I look forward to all of you coming to see us at our stand afterwards to learn more about the Rise Academies.
Spinning.
It sank a lot more than I was expecting.
I know.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Anton?
Shall I go first then?
Please.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Anton Padmasiri. I'm the founder CEO of WealthOS. Thank you, Danielle, for that introduction. WealthOS is a cloud-native core wealth management platform. We are trying to upgrade the infrastructure for wealth management industry in the UK by developing a frictionless digital native platform so that products, savings, investments, and retirement products can come to market much faster and much cheaper, and organizations can focus on customer experience, operational resilience and efficiency, and risk reduction over maintenance and spending tons of money on their infrastructure stack. Really excited to be supported by Rise, who've been an incredible partner in this journey. Yeah, that's a bit about myself. Duncan?
Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Duncan Knight. I'm lucky enough to be a Barclays scale-up coach. My background is having run a couple of tech businesses for, I think, about 16 years. The first one was in Australia. I sold my house and moved to the other side of the world on over a glass of wine decision in a bar in New York. And that was a cybersecurity, well, it wasn't called cyber back then, there was not such a thing, a cybersecurity and IT service management business. And we worked throughout Asia and North America. And we were the only tier one software partner with Lenovo globally, which was quite cool for a little firm in Australia. Sold that business and came back to the UK and co-founded a health tech business called My Cognition. My co-founder, who had 36 years R&D, central nervous system drug development experience, was very much the health side of the health tech business. And we created the UK's first software medical device, prescribable by the NHS, CE marked, to help people measure their cognitive function. So that's everything you to learn, think, and remember. And we created video games to then train your cognitive function and put that through full randomized controlled trials. And that was good fun. And I guess I normally introduce myself as a sales guy from 30 plus years of B2B enterprise sales, starting in water treatment and then through IT. I think being a salesperson, the reason that my personality lends itself because I'm a problem solver. So I like helping people solve their problems. I don't want to necessarily solve them for them. I'm not too keen on the doing, but I do like to, having done a lot of it, but I do like to help people solve their problems. And so being a coach mentor for the last 8 years with hundreds of companies throughout the world is quite fulfilling. So that's kind of me. Okay. So we thought the conversation and talking with the Barclays team to talk about what it means to go from a founder of a startup through to a scale-up founder, CEO, is quite the transition. So for those of you who've done it, it can be a little bit of a miserable existence. Lots of highs, but also certainly lots of lows, and not much bubbling along the middle. So we thought this was a great conversation to have. And the first place to start, I thought, was accountability. So my experience of strategy and planning is, first of all, I had to make it up as I went along. So it wasn't strategic. And it wasn't until things started to go wrong, I was like, maybe we should put some strategy in place here. And I think when you get busy, because you've got this great idea, you've got a problem that you think is worthy to solve, and you've hired a few people around you, but you're still doing lots of doing, accountability is a sort of challenging place to be. And Peter Drucker, what gets measured gets done, is a really important thing. So the first question to Anton, excuse me, fiddling with my ear again, is how do you keep yourself accountable?
That's a great question. Yeah, very, very important piece of the puzzle when you go from founder to CEO. I mean, when you found a company, it's a pipe dream, it's a piece of paper. I mean, there's nothing there really, and you've got a bit of an idea you're stretching around with. So you're doing everything. And what you find is, I mean, as you go through your founder journey, it's a series of steps of kind of not dying, right? A series of steps of, you're still alive. But what you're going to find is, longer you're alive, your persona needs to change, and you need to consciously change that. In that, you're doing a lot of stuff at the early stage of a company. You don't have the money to recruit anyone. You don't have the money to delegate. So you're everything from filing your accounts, incorporating your company, writing user stories, to designing everything, and you're doing everything. But I think you need to consciously figure out what point does your accountability change. Longer you're alive, that equation changes. So what you're really accountable as you stay alive, as you get to a kind of go from founder to CEO, is for the strategy, for communication, for people, because you need to coalesce a group of people around you to make the vision that you've got a reality. So accountability is incredibly important, and it's one of the most difficult things because it's your baby. You're never going to think that somebody else is good enough to do it. And this is going to be one of the biggest traps, and that a lot of founders get into, is you're never going to trust anyone. I think trust is slightly strong, but you're never going to think, even if you trust somebody, to do it in that way. But you need to trust that transition, and you need to take a lot of accountability. And as a part of this kind of journey through Rise, working with Duncan, it's been incredibly helpful for me and my team. And it's still a learning journey, right? There's a lot of doing I still do, but there's also a lot of delegating that I've done and kind of learned from working with kind of Duncan and the rest of the team, in terms of how do you then take the step towards being a CEO, understanding what it is that you're supposed to do in terms of making sure your organization is capitalized, the lights are kept on, the money is raised, the sales are happening. So it's really important. So I guess I'm going to kind of come back to Duncan as well, and kind of ask you shared a lot of wisdom with myself and our senior team in terms of how to think about this, but it'll be great to kind of hear some thoughts for the audience as well as me, in terms of kind of your thoughts around accountability as well.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason I'm not a founder at the moment is because I hate being held accountable. I'm not even joking, it's completely true. So I will go again, but at the moment I'm quite happy to do my own thing and be accountable to myself. But the thing I learned, I think, was transparency. So being uncomfortably transparent when it came to your goals, KPIs, whatever you want to call them, and having a group of people around you that you trust to share those with, that will then, they'll be a buddy and they'll tell you how it is. And that's really important. And that's something I did accidentally the first time. It was like I just fell into that, having issues and finding people that are going through that the same stage as you, and actually to buddy up with someone. That was what I did the first time around, and that was really, really helpful. And it brings us on to, Anton sort of talked about, start to build a team. So once you get busy, once you've got things you can only do so much yourself, you start to build a team around you, right? And one of the challenges is those people probably won't be as good as you would like them to be, because lots of different reasons. How do you work with building a team, delegating? You like doing stuff, some of the stuff, you're a product guy, love doing the product, but actually you haven't got time to do all the products. How do you get on with that?
Yeah, I think, I'll come to the broader point about delegation. I think that the story I'd say is I come from a product background, I mean, somebody genuinely had to kind of prize it out of my hand, the fact that the product strategy and the product roadmap, because that's what I love. I love kind of designing, working with architects. That's my sweet spot. That's my comfortable spot. But obviously, as a CEO, you're not the product manager, so you have to hand it in. So handing that over was such a difficult thing to someone else, because the vision, the product vision. I'm a product-led founder, right? I come from a product background. That's my passion. So giving that away was really difficult, but nevertheless had to be given away, and you become comfortable. And you actually, the slightly embarrassing thing is you realize how this person is oodles better than you are. When you think you're a great product manager, and this person comes in as like, they're systematized, they've got great Confluence pages full of knowledge transfer content, great user stories, great processes in place. So I think going back to that point, delegating is so important, and building a great team is important. So those first few hires that you do are so important, because they are going to kind of define the success of the next stage of your kind of organization. And I'm really proud. I think, Duncan, you met the kind of the senior leadership team at WealthOS, and kind of what that does is it makes you scale ready in that stuff that you did on from the back of your from the side of your table. They become you need processes around that, whether you're recruiting more people, whether you're kind of going out to market to recruit people, whether you're fundraising, whether you're doing a sales. Things that you thought you could do via an email or a WhatsApp message, they require processes. To put those processes in, you need kind of accountable leadership roles and people whom you can delegate. And I mean, if you take WealthOS, for example, whether it is our brand presence, our sales, our finance, it's because of the Shrees, Shahs, and kind of Steves of this world that we've been able to behave in the way we have. Is that because that leadership team then takes responsibility for that area, puts processes in place, and as a whole, the organization starts kind of humming and looking like not a grown up, but a growing baby. That's so important, because as an organization, you can't just be good at one thing. Your technology can be the best in the world, but if you're not communicating, it's pretty useless. If you don't have a brand, it's pretty useless. So all these things needs to happen. As a CEO, you can't do everything. Therefore, you need good people. You need to delegate and allow them, give them the independence to do all that work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also met Ange, the product manager, and she's amazing. So.
Not got her glasses yet.
Very good. But Ange doesn't wear glasses. She's the only person in the business that doesn't wear glasses. So we've got to sort that out. Her eyes are way too young. I think that's the problem. I mean, I said, early on, the blanket statement early on, people won't be as good as you at doing things. The reality for me was actually it's because I wasn't a recruiter. I hadn't hired people actively in the past with any kind of process. And so the problem that I had is I hired too quickly. I was keen to grow and bring people on board. And so the fault was 100% mine in terms of hiring the wrong people for the roles. So that was my main learning, and taking that forward. I think the first 2 or 3 people I hired, I won't say they were a disaster because I don't want to be disrespectful, but I had put them into the wrong positions, and I hadn't necessarily put the right level of support around them. So I think I learned an awful lot about that, and certainly not making assumptions about how things should be done was enormous. It's a critical thing to be. You create a strategy, which I didn't do, and then you expect people to deliver on things that I didn't tell them. So there's a couple of failings there and tough things to learn. And it brings me nicely on to learning to lead, which I think as founders, most people are fairly natural leaders. I'm not saying we like the sound of our own voices and we've got these massive, horrible egos, but there is something that is fairly common with it, even introverted. I'm reasonably introverted, but I'm sitting here quite happily to do so. But I think we're quite good leaders. We're all natural leaders, but not necessarily very good at being a natural leader. And so you need to be very conscious about how to become a leader and learn from people who have led. You need to read a lot of books, listen to other blogs, but you need to be doing it in a very conscious manner. And so my question to Anton is, what do you do and what have you done about becoming the best leader that you can be, other than obviously our conversations, because that goes without saying?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a bit self-conscious because this is a long journey, and I'm at the very early stage of this journey. So I'm not gonna offer tons of wisdom. So Duncan can actually definitely talk about it a lot more authoritatively than I can. But definitely, learning to lead is so important because it's the most important thing you'll do as a CEO, as a founder. You're setting the vision, you're motivating, you're also communicating bad news. Uh, and one of the things that you realize as you kind of grow as an organization is all the good decisions with easy kind of answers get made by someone else. You never get to make them, right? All the stuff that come to you are, the stuff with the most incomplete information. There are no good options, and then you have to communicate them. So I think kind of learning to lead, set a vision, communicate, be present for your team, hugely important kind of qualities. And you need to spend a lot of time doing personal kind of reflections on your leadership style, getting feedback, and making sure that you're always improving. I think I was talking about kind of scaling culture yesterday. For better or for worse, in a startup environment, a new company, the culture gets set at the initial stages by the CEO, either set consciously or unconsciously, right? So you're either, it's not that you're saying this is the kind of company I want, but your behaviors sometimes drive that culture. So it's important, and leadership therefore goes with it, in that you're either building an organization where people respond and you can scale that response and you can grow, or it just falls apart. It doesn't matter however good your proposition is, however good your product is, and however good the kind of market reaction is. If you're not leading well, the company kind of falls apart. We've seen enough examples in technology. I mean, very well publicized stuff in technology about kind of the importance of leadership and how failure really fails companies, destroys shareholder value, and so on and so forth. So I guess for me is, I can't offer much advice, but what I'd say is make that a conscious part of your learning, reflection, and kind of get professional help in the nicest possible way. Get professional help to be a good leader. Would you?
I've seen that on your Slack channels a lot.
Yeah. Would you agree? I mean,
yeah, 100%. I mean, I've given you all the horror stories of me being an early founder, but actually the thing I learned was about being humble and listening to feedback and taking that feedback on board and making changes, in a considered way. So it's not how high do I have to jump, but it's being considered and making changes that have to change in order to make the organization better, right? I think that's humility is a trait often missed when we're really busy. It's not because we're, like say, ego-driven horrors, but when you're really busy, you just want to crack on, and sometimes not listening and not being humble do easily get missed. And I think one of the things that I also learned along the way, that taking time out as a founder to think is also really important. I was complaining to someone about this the other day, is that at school we don't get taught to think. We get taught to, hit the numbers for the teacher in, when you go to high school. You've got exams and numbers and all that, but you're not actually taught useful, necessarily everyday stuff. So as business, we all work with people, right, that are a nightmare to work with because they don't think, they just do straight away, right? We all have them and we all do, but there are some people. And you think, if you just learned to think, how valuable that would be in life, especially in the workplace. So I think having the ability to get away without distractions in an environment where you can be creative, and we're not all creative thinkers, so having some, again, being very conscious about this. Is there anything you have learned along the way, that you have tips and tricks? What do you do around thinking time?
Yeah, for me, I think deep thinking is essential as a leader. You're not going to win as a founder, as a CEO, and also as an organization if you don't kind of spend time thinking. At the end of the day, thinking is so important because you're a strategic leader and you have incomplete information. You're working with probabilities, most of the time less than 50% probabilities. So thinking is so important about different eventualities and what are the best decisions to make. So in terms of my personal hacks, I like running and I don't like running with other people. I actually like running alone, and that is my thinking time. In fact, I find that that's the time I can genuinely focus, because my brain is slightly busy. It's always talking to me, which is not a conducive thing, but a lot of people find this. So running kind of, it helps me focus. So if I have a problem, actually I can spend 60, 70 minutes running, just thinking about that, and you can come back and write about it. And then I spend a lot of time reading and kind of listening to podcasts, but I also spend time talking to people like Duncan and kind of other leaders about how they think. Because the great thing about, again, we'll come to this later in the topic, is if you have a good set of people to bounce ideas off of, that they've solved it in a certain way. Now, you might not agree, you might build on it, but what's great is that they have solved it in a way that can go into that hopper in the way you think about kind of solving problems. Again, would love to kind of hear about your hacks, how you talk to founders about spending time thinking and kind of spending time on kind of personal development.
Yeah, I mean, my tactics are about getting out and about. I can't sit in a coffee shop. It's not a productive thinking space for me. But I'm a runner, I'm a swimmer, get out in nature, sit on a park bench with my phone. People say, "I'll leave your phone at home." For me, that doesn't work, because I don't write very well. If I write, I can't read it, so kind of wasting my time. I'll dictate notes into my phone if I'm sat around or walking somewhere. That's really useful to me. But absolutely, I use certainly running for 65 to 75 minutes. Probably faster than you.
You're big.
And yeah, I use that as well. But getting out in nature, I'm really fortunate to live near a massive, great big area of parkland and woodland, and you'll often see me walking around, running around there, talking to myself. I'm that guy on the news. Yeah, so that for me is really important. And also, Anton mentioned, surrounding yourself, right, with other people. So not necessarily mentors who will tell you what to do, but listening to other people who've had the similar problem is really useful, because if you don't have the ability to work it out for yourself, sometimes you don't learn, and therefore you don't learn to think better. And one of the interesting things for me as sort of a Rise coach has been to see the interactions between the peer founders within Rise who have bounced things off each other. It's been really interesting and quite satisfying to see them grow. It's been really interesting to see how that's worked. And what's the value of you having that peer community, Rise with the sales pitch of Rise, but also the community you've built around. How's that been valuable for you?
Oh, hugely essential. And actually, yeah, I mean, from right at the start, build a group of people, because it's a lonely place. Being a CEO and a founder is a little bit of a scary place, and there are going to be very dark moments, and you want to have people whom you turn to, right? I mean, things might not go well, but people who can give you a little bit of perspective, because you can get down a bit of a rabbit hole and kind of into a dark place. So having that peer group from different aspects, it could be a peer group who they don't know anything about your company or anything about your doing, but they're good. They will be levelers for you. But equally professionally, kind of building that network is so important. And kind of coming back to the Rise Growth Academy, that's been incredible, both from communicating with fellow founders and this incredible team. It's been great. And then having someone like Duncan. So whether it is Rise, just look for opportunities to build that network, that peer group. Because what you find is those dark moments, you're not alone. Like, one of the things that I found at IFGS is every time you talk to a founder, they share some of the same angst. Market's bad, it's so difficult to do this, so difficult to get clients. They will all share it. It won't solve your problems, but you're not alone. And it's hugely kind of, again, comforting is a bad word, but at least you walk away saying, okay, it's not just me. And yes, but kind of formally as well, kind of having that support group. Again, not in a negative connotation. It's hugely important to have a peer group whom you can bounce things off. They might come from within the organization, outside the organization, from your family environment, for example, my girls, my kind of 15. So because obviously WealthOS was significantly spent a significant amount of time in the lockdown, they can tell my pitch pretty much easily. And they do this, they do not on TikTok, but they'll video and say, oh, cloud native wealth management application. And it's a good leveler for you. Like, okay, don't they're making fun of you. It's nice to hear that. But yeah, I mean, again, you talk to a lot of founders like myself as well as leadership teams. I think will be great for you to add some color around the importance of that peer group.
I mean, it's good to have people that have that 50,000-foot view of your business. They don't necessarily have all the detail. Even fellow founders, you can't necessarily share if you're not in a kind of structured environment. But hearing the war stories from everybody else, and I'm giving it like it's all doom and gloom being a founder, but actually there are far more highs in my experience than there are lows. But there isn't a lot of middle stuff going on. And as Anton said earlier, you're the one that gets all the problems that don't have the answers. And so that's the challenging part. I think for me, like my worst ever time was probably when I couldn't pay people. I ran out of cash, my fault, right? Strategy, cash flow, having good people, those are your three main things as a founder, probably, depending on what you're doing. But Friday night, a client hadn't paid, they owed a $500,000 invoice, hadn't paid, and that was the end of the month. And so I spent after I got off the floor from weeping, which I literally sat on my living room floor cross-legged when I realized the invoice hadn't been paid, I got up and I contacted my friends, my peers within the Entrepreneurs Organisation. I was a member of the board in Sydney, and we had a thing called Forum. Everyone came round, every single person, all 8 people around my house, and we spent a number of hours on Saturday brainstorming. Sunday I got into action. I'd never heard a thing called invoice financing before. It was sorted. 2 days late, people got paid late, right? Everyone had to phone out their mortgage provider and say, I can't pay you today. That was utterly hideous. And you won't get that unless you've done something like that to your people that you promised to pay and don't pay them. It was dreadful, hence the tears. Appropriate use of tears, in my opinion. But we paid people like Tuesday, Wednesday, never ran out of money again. But if I hadn't had that support network, I would not have heard of invoice financing at a tactical level. But also the fact that you get out what you put in, right? You give, you don't give to receive, but you get out what you put in. And they all rallied around me, and I've done the same for a number of them since, and still 10 years on, still have those conversations with them still now, and they're the other side of the world. So, and that's us. That's jazz hands.
That's jazz hands.
That's done. But I know that we've got some time for questions. If anyone's got questions, there is a roving mic that is going to come around. So hopefully it's not going to be really awkward and no one actually asks questions. We haven't got a stooge in the audience, although I could look at Katie in the middle. Katie knows you very well. It could be a stooge, but we haven't got a stooge. So if anyone's got any questions, there is a roving mic, and we can hopefully be useful. No one's going to take the fall for the group. People are leaving. There's a question at the front.
Hi guys, so great to hear your shared experiences and how you've been supporting each other. Anton, you mentioned the market at the moment and how it's quite a difficult time. Are you finding from talking to other founders at IFGS if there's any tips or ideas out there on how to raise in this market that you can share with the community?
I guess the few things that I'm hearing, Sonal, is that revenue is becoming very important. So the market's changed in a way because economics have come back, I guess. Interest rates have made an appearance. Cost of capital has changed the way investors think about their investment. Cash has disappeared. So all these means that investors are looking for sustainable businesses with revenues, control costs, and things like that. So I think what the tip, it's not a tip, but what I'm hearing is if you can show revenues and if you can show cost efficiency, path to profitability, there is capital available, and kind of making sure getting those metrics and kind of ticks in the boxes is so important for investors right now. It's no longer free cash for potential kind of 10x multiples that you're going to get because cash is so cheap.
Mad
At
ideas.
least that's what I'm hearing.
Mad ideas are no longer applicable, are they? Yeah, I spend half my time helping people prepare for Series A. So that growth of leadership through to Series A and then beyond. And the challenge is that people have historically got away with not having enough proof points. And our proof points, obviously, the ultimate proof point is revenue. But there are a whole bunch of other metrics that people don't get to achieve or even document in some cases, and then expect to have this, well, we're worth £30 million, and we've been going 10 minutes, and we've got this amazing idea with this tiny market that we've proven, and it's really obvious why they're not getting funded. And they don't prepare, they don't think ahead enough. So if you want to raise a, Series B, you have got to be thinking about it probably 12 to 18 months before you need the cash in the bank, because it will take you 9 to 12 months to actually raise the money once you're ready. So being prepared and thinking on the way is super critical, and that's still missing in a lot of people's thinking, especially when they're on VC Twitter, and VC Twitter's talking about some mad valuation on the West Coast. And we're going to go to America one day, yeah, but you haven't even nailed, the UK market yet. So delusions of grandeur, lack of preparation is really hurting people. What a good question. Any other questions? Yes, please.
It sounds like you have a really good relationship, but sometimes obviously kind of when there's matching happening, it doesn't always the magic doesn't come together. So how have you kind of worked to build those sort of bonds of trust together? And it's obviously it can be quite vulnerable to open up, and how have you approached that from the beginning of your relationship to where you are now?
We've been quite fortunate actually, and we kind of just fell into getting on. One of my style is kind of quite direct, and then I smile at the end of it. So I'll say something fairly negative, but then I'll make you feel good about yourself afterwards. And I know that most people appreciate getting to the point, because as founders we haven't got time to sort of meander. If you're working with someone who has actually had that experience before, something very direct experience, right? Oh, well, no, my sister-in-law, she did this, and that's not useful. But because actually that happened to me, like me, and not being able to pay my people, right? If you've got cash flow problem, I'll understand, and I might be useful in giving you a response. So getting to the point very quickly in a nice way, without being horrible about it, I think that's been quite useful for us.
Yeah,
that sounds like I'm talking myself up there, but that's how I kind of work. But that's been quite useful for you and your SLT as well.
So I guess retrospectively, I'd say, so the reflection on that is Duncan's directness and the senior team's willingness to genuinely grow. So we went in saying, listen, this is a great opportunity. We've got this guy who's run 2 businesses, and we've got this program, and we've got all this material. So you can go in 2 ways. You can be very defensive and say this is a waste of time, or you lean in. So if you lean in, and what happens is that actually a really good relationship starts building. So we've been lucky, I guess. Lucky in terms of
certainly initially, yeah.
I'm not sure how to recreate that, but if you as a team and an individual, you lean in, wanting to learn, and the other side comes obviously experience, that's going to be a magic mix always.
My experience is that most people I'm fortunate enough to work with are on that path of wanting to learn something. They want to change, they want to be better, and a lot of founders, to be fair, are like that, right?
Yeah.
There are obviously some instances and egos kind of get in the way, and you can't kind of help everybody. That does happen every now and again, and you kind of have to just say, look, it's not my time. I'm kind of, it's your time you're wasting. If you want to not be open to stuff, it's not for a minute. Everyone has to do everything someone in advisory capacity has to do. But you have to learn a little bit, right? You learn from a lot of people, and then you make your own decisions. But your whole team was so open. Like the transformation, it was quite transformational over the period of time we've been working together. It's been extraordinary.
And we have pipeline.
Absolutely. You do have CRM now. No more spreadsheets. It's not revolutionary. Yeah. The question.
How do you work with what I'll call arrogant founders, right, who are determined that they know absolutely everything, but cannot actually undertake a CEO role?
Shall I tell that my experience? Well, my experience is I don't.
Leave me out of it.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, because I work in a way that you have to want to work with me in order to get the value from the time, and I'm not cheap. So people who want to have to pay an invoice, are not going to not do it. I get put in front of people who get involved in free programs and things like that that aren't really on board with the idea of learning, and those short conversations are normally quite short. I'm not very patient, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. But I don't really want to waste my time with people that don't want to at least listen to some ideas. Like I said, it's not about doing what I think is a good idea, because there's always a blend of some of the stuff I say is probably quite useful and some of it's completely not. But yeah, it's a very short, direct. I love working with all sorts of people. I'm really fortunate to work all over the world. It's a really cool thing to be able to do, and you always get somebody. And I would say most of the time people come around and they kind of, okay, yeah, maybe we'll have a conversation. But it normally only comes around actually if I'm interested in asking lots of questions, right? If I want to learn and I try and figure out what's stopping them from actually being a bit more receiving. That's probably how I get through it. But you can't help everyone, right?
Hello. I'm just wondering, there's this constant narrative around the founder and CEO journey being super lonely, super dark, super
Black.
Unsupported. No, not that.
Darkness.
But why is that? Is there a lack of support, a lack of focus, a lack of founding team?
I think that's a great question. Maybe it shouldn't be. I think it's because, again, just going back to that original point I made about from starting a company, the journey you go through, you accumulate. So I'll talk for myself. I think the thing is, I've got imposter syndrome, right? You start with an idea, and all of a sudden you find yourself about 25 people believing in you and around you, right? And you take a lot of responsibility for that, and it depends on the characteristic and the personality of the person. So I feel very, very responsible, and sometimes what happens is in difficult moments you get yourself into more difficulty. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing, so it might not be for someone who is able to leave that side relatively kind of divorced from personality and things like that. But I think it's because of the kind of difficulty of getting to a place where you've built the organization to a level sufficient enough that its survival is never guaranteed, but somewhat stabilized. There are so many kind of pitfalls that you go through, and those are, at least from a kind of a personal point of view, can be very difficult moments, because you sometimes don't see a way forward, and you get yourself into that kind of slight dark cycle. But that's, I mean, any thoughts, having spoken to so many founders?
Yeah, I think as I said, the problem, it's not a problem. The reason is that the buck stops with you, and if you've made this thing, if you've created this thing, no one will ever care about it like you do. And I genuinely believe that. Actually, I know lots of people say, well, you hire this amazing team and they're super inspired to come to work, and that's true. You can. But actually, for the majority of your business, it's still a job. They will go home at some point and they'll think about their cat or whatever, right? Whereas you go home and you think about the business, right? You go on holiday, and I've been at Disney, with my kids, with my laptop, because I had things I had to get done. Now that's early stage life, doesn't get that way forever, but no one ever cares about it like you do. So you will remonstrate to yourself, and you will think, there are just things that no one else will get. And that's why surrounding yourself with other founders is so important, because you then have this amazing network. And I hate the word kind of support network, but people do support you, support each other in this kind of journey. And so I think it's basic as that.
And slight kind of tangent to that, I think kind of what I'd say is that, and it's right, at early stages, unintentionally, you're always thinking about it. Weekends, evenings, school run, that's what you're thinking. And I'm not, and when you look back, that's exactly what goes through your head. And that's actually one of the reasons it's hugely important as a founder and a CEO, both for the good of your employees, of your company, you should invest in kind of mental health as well as physical health. I think if you're in good shape mentally and physically, I think that makes things a lot easier, because it does become a bit of a strain on yourself. And it's easy to say that's not important, but I think that's a critical part of.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think it's like being a founder is a massive privilege. I made it sound like it's all hideous, but it's an absolute privilege. The freedom you get to choose to do what you want to do when you want to do it is second to none. So I think it's the most amazing thing you can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are we at time?
Thank you so much to Anton and Duncan for sharing some really raw and honest insights around that journey from founder to CEO. I feel like there might have been one or two more questions, so please feel free to continue the conversation. Anton is based in our space, FinTech's on the rise, and of course we're opposite as a team. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.